You've heard from our next speaker before. He's Chris Marvin, Managing Director of Gautier 6. But Chris is going to take the next 12 minutes to explain to you his personal motivations for doing what he does. And I think you'll find this fascinating. Chris.
I'll put this here. Hi, it's me again. I was actually just supposed to only be on the panel earlier, but if you recall the joke I made about the chiropractors, so it turns out Will's dad's a chiropractor. He was really upset about it, and so he made me come up and do this again. So I'm here now. I put this together in the last hour. I'm here now to talk to you about, first my clicker, right here, to talk to you about why that is the best thing that ever happened to me. This is my Black Hawk helicopter on August 12th, 2004, near the Afghan-Pakistan border. And right in this area is where, after the aircraft came to rest, that's where I was stuck for about 20 or 30 minutes. And as I've reflected on this day, over the past 9 years now, it's become abundantly clear to me that the majority of my accomplishments stem from this. Now, when we think of combat wounded service members, we think of amputations and traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, which are all very real injuries that have real effects on real people. But as we learned with this last panel, sometimes they're overstated. I don't want to speak for any of the doctors or scientists or researchers, but I will say that the numbers that we use typically are that 1 in 5 individuals who experience a traumatic event in combat will result in PTSD. And it actually matches up to the idea that 1 in 5 human beings are genetically predisposed to PTSD. And that for those who have PTSD, they experience symptoms on a broad range, and they can get better because PTSD is reparable. And all of these things lead to the idea that, at least in the United States, of the 6 million people who suffer from PTSD in a given year, less than 5% have been to combat. And I make this point only to say that PTSD is not a soldier's problem. It's a human condition. And I'd like to contrast that human condition that is many times overstated with another condition that happens in similar circumstances that is often understated. It's a condition that has only been studied for about the past 10 years, and it's a condition that the seminal study was actually released in 2004, the same year I was wounded in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. It's a condition called post-traumatic growth, or PTG. Again, full disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional or mental health professional, but I've done a little bit of research, and I'm going to give you a bit of what I've read on post-traumatic growth, but mostly reflected through my own personal experiences. And so in this study in 2004, they identified 3 conditions for post-traumatic growth. One is that after a trauma, rising to a challenge reveals abilities. The second is that trauma strengthens important relationships in our lives. And the third is that trauma induces changes in priorities or philosophies, or in the way we view the world. Post-traumatic growth, they say in the study, is also significantly more prevalent than post-traumatic stress disorder. And they can occur simultaneously, I think, as was mentioned earlier. Post-traumatic growth, I think most importantly, is not simply a return to a baseline, but it is progress past the baseline that is usually very profound. So it's different from strength or resilience or optimism, but all of these things are positive outcomes from trauma. And in my experience, they're all very important. And so when I think about the idea of post-traumatic growth, I think about synthesizing the idea, making it a little bit more simple, and and stating it similar to the way this man did. Anybody know who this is? This is 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And he said something that we've all heard and many of us have probably repeated, which is, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. It's pretty simple. So in 2004, I had a broken left foot. I had 2 broken legs. I had a broken right arm. I had shattered all the bones on this side of my face, and I did what was permanent damage to my knees, both of them, both of my hips, and both of my shoulders. Most people call that their whole body, and I like to list them out one by one for dramatic effect. I went through 4 years of recovery, during which I had 10 major surgeries, the last of which was more than 3 years after I was wounded, thousands of hours of physical therapy. My right arm was broken for a year. My right leg was broken for 2.5 years. With no complications, it was just that bad of a fracture. About 2 years after I was wounded, I received a retro diagnosis from a doctor who said I had suffered a mild traumatic brain injury. I think the irony, somebody snickered, because the irony is that a mild traumatic brain injury, I was told that it means the symptoms are gone within 2 years. So getting that diagnosis 2 years later was anticlimactic. I also dealt with an issue that a psychologist called an enhanced death sense, or an increased feeling of fragility and sometimes anxiety when I was in typically normal situation like driving on the freeway. But maybe the most important thing that I discovered during my recovery was that I'd lost something. I'd lost my sense of purpose. See, before I was wounded, I was in Afghanistan as a 25-year-old platoon leader in the Army, in charge of 25 soldiers and $25 million worth of equipment. I was a young aviator honing my skills in a hostile combat environment. And when I woke up in the morning, I had a very distinct reason or purpose to get out of bed. But then on August 12th, all that was taken away in an instant. And I found myself, with the exception of physical therapy, without a real purpose. Until one day, I was wheeling my wheelchair to the mailbox, and I opened it, and I pulled out an envelope, and it was addressed to me, and the return address said, the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, which may sound like a reputable organization. Inside it was a $500 check, because I guess I'd won the lottery or something. The more I thought about it, though, the more I realized that the people who sent me that check, they didn't know me at all, right? They knew that I'd been wounded in combat, and they had my address. But they didn't know that I had a full-time job with a full salary, and the military was paying for all of my medical bills. And they didn't know that the military had paid for my school before that. I didn't have a pile of envelopes with bills on my kitchen table. I didn't even have a family to feed at that time. And so their money wasn't going to go to keep the lights on and put food on the table like they thought or assumed. I did know there were people in my community that had those needs, so I took all $500 and I gave it to a local food bank, because I was not a charity case, and I did not want to be treated like one. So as I continued to recover, I continued to search for a sense of purpose, and I continued to get charitable offers, all of which I turned down, thinking of that $500. And then one day, about 3 years later, I was listening to the radio, and I heard about a nonprofit that helped wounded veterans volunteer in their communities. And I thought, that's it. That's what I need. That's my sense of purpose. So I became the first fellowship recipient of a nonprofit organization called The Mission Continues. And The Mission Continues challenged wounded veterans to continue their service to their country by serving in their community in volunteer and nonprofit organizations. And I liked that organization so much that I stuck around for almost 2 years as the director of that fellowship program. And I was so motivated and inspired by the work we did at The Mission Continues that I knew I had to better myself. So I went to school. I went to get my graduate degree, where I was able to study and grow and learn. I learned how to better run a nonprofit organization. I graduated, and I got a job at a nonprofit called Be the Change. And at Be the Change, I was able to take a smaller veterans portfolio and grow it into a national campaign called Got Your Six. And in the military, Got Your Six means I've got your back. And what we do in this campaign is we work collaboratively with the best national nonprofit organizations in the United States working on veteran issues, and we help them to enhance their impact and amplify their work. And more importantly, together, we're changing the conversation in America so that veterans and military family members are perceived as leaders and civic assets who will reinvigorate our communities. Now, I've dedicated a lot of my life to these ideas and to this work, and it's all because of this. If I'm not wounded, I don't get a check in the mail, and I don't have the motivation that I felt to not be treated like a charity case. If I don't have that motivation, I'm not inspired by the mission continues and the work they do. Then I don't have the knowledge I gained from going back to graduate school. I don't have the opportunity that I got at Be the Change to start Got Your Six, and we don't have a chance to change the national conversation around veterans. All of my accomplishments stem from this. And what I want you all to take away from this talk is the idea that in our nations, in our societies, and in our communities, we're likely all in need of a significant paradigm shift. Away from the idea that those who have been traumatized or those who have served in the military are part of a group that needs to be treated as charity cases or pitied. And that more than likely, that same group of people is the most likely to have grown from their experiences and to be willing to serve here in our communities. If we can empower veterans and have high expectations of them, they will respond and they will act as leaders and civic assets because they've been trained to be leaders and team builders and problem solvers. And they will reinvigorate our communities. Because after all, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Thank you.